Alright guys, we're recording, we're live. Welcome to the Airbrush Form class. This is on Blog TV. You're watching this Blog TV. And what we're doing right now is we're getting ready to airbrush this great portrait of a wolf. Now this was airbrushed by one of the guys on the forum, Jesse. He airbrushed this on something, and then he said that this would be a good class to do. Now the original artist of this is Dulagards or something like that. I can't really read it perfectly, but he's the original artist of it. And Jesse had to do a saw blade of this, and he airbrushed it up, and I think that was about a year ago or something. So he airbrushed that on a saw blade, and this was one of the reference that was given up. It was one size that came up with the idea of doing a wolf for the hair pattern, because it's all different style furs and different directions and stuff. So we're going to be airbrushing that I'm using a steel panel. This is just a piece of steel that I plasma cut out. I buy 4x10 or 4x12 sheets of it, and then cut it up. So what we did first is we projected this onto the surface. Now there's a lot of different ways to get this onto the surface. One of the ways is to blow it up to the size that you're going to be using. If you're using this size as an original, then you could actually lay it down on the surface, put a piece of transfer paper, which is, I use a company from Serral. It's a wax-free transfer paper. I lay that down on the surface, and I can sit there and draw on the image, and that'll transfer directly onto it. Now, on something like this, I would probably use a graphite color because it's a deep color for the Serral paper. The Serral comes in different shades, different colors. If you were going to be airbrushing this on a red background, you'd use a red or an orange Serral, so that way the colors are close to what you're airbrushing. So the closer you can keep it to the colors of your image, the better off you are. Just in case some of those lines show. Now with me, I like to see some of the sketch marks, some of the drawing in my original art, because then it kind of shows that you're actually an artist doing this. It's not just a photocopy or a reference. You know, it kind of separates it a little bit. So that's one way. Some people will actually sit there and cut out the actual image with an X-Acto knife, lay it down, spray the base through it, basically creating a stencil from it. That's one way. But this way it's this way it's more freehand. I kind of like that freehand soft look. So that's how I like working with it. Okay, this image is basically a blue-violet overlay on a black and white image. If you look at this, if you look at the artwork here we have, it's basically black and white and grays. When you look at the image, it's just like, I mean, compare it next to our little Elvis right here that you can kind of see a little bit of. It's the same tones, just has a little bit of kind of like a bluish purple wash over the top of it. So our drawing today is actually going to be done in grayscales. Even though it's color, it's going to be done in grayscales. So I have the paints that I mixed up last week for our portrait. These are my colors. Now this is Wicked Colors, black and white, the detail white and the detail black. And what I start out with is a certain amount of drops. My light one is My light one is 2 drops of black to half of a bottle of white. Then I filled the rest of the bottle up with, not quite, three-quarters of the way I went up with the extender. I think that's what it's called by Wicked. Wicked is transparent base. I took the O200 and filled it the rest of the way, almost up to about here, and then the rest I filled up with a reducer just to get a little start on breaking down the pigments. Now I found out that Wicked loves to be in their reducer for about 12 to 15 hours prior to airbrushing. Now what that does is that breaks down the pigment, the binder, everything about that paint. It kind of starts breaking it all down and helping reduce that paint down. Then I mixed up another one, which I put 6 drops of black in, which actually turned out to be a little too dark, so I ended up lightening it up a little bit inside the cup last time, and what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to go ahead and lighten it up a little more, just throwing some of my Wicked white into it. So that way it gets a little bit lighter. Okay, so now we reduce it down. I just made this a little bit lighter so it's closer to the colors. Now what you want, here's what I like. I like to make colors to where from one shade to the other shade it's not that much of a difference, but it's enough to start adding that shadowing. I don't care if I have to do 15 layers. That's, like I said, I'm not in the full rush hurry of I have to get this piece of artwork done right away. What I like to do is what I call creep up on the image, where you're airbrushing it. You're not trying to get a huge amount of difference right away in that area. It's something to where you're sneaking up on that image. What it helps with, John Black said that this is interesting. Would letting the paint sit in the reducer like that also help with tip dry? What it does is it actually does help with tip dry a lot. It actually helps with the flowing of it also. If you notice, you sit there and start spraying back, and it's like it won't come back. You spray it off to the side, and you hear a big old poof coming off the airbrush. That's a little tiny piece of pigment that didn't go through the airbrush flowingly. So what you have to do is every once in a while you feel like you have to sit there and clean it all off and get that spray off. It helps. It helps with that. It breaks down the pigment. So yes, it helps a lot with tip dry. Tip dry is a natural beast of airbrushing. Anytime you have air flowing over the needle, you're going to have tip dry. Air dries paint. With an airbrush, you're increasing the air compared to your surrounding area by thousands of times. So as you're spraying, you're naturally drying the paint on the needle, which is what they consider tip dry. So as you're spraying, you're drying the paint. So no matter what, that's part of airbrushing. That's kind of like saying when Rick eats, he pours food down the front of his shirts. That's just the natural way of me eating. It's going to happen. No matter what you do, it's going to happen. Part of it. So the first color that I always love doing on these type of portraits is a light gray that is a shade different than my white. So I just had to make you a liar, Biker Granny. She just said I do not wear white shirts. my light gray is just a shade darker than my background. Now, there's people in here, right now we have one size in here who actually is colorblind, and he can't see a huge difference in between colors. So, make this first color as light as you can and still be able to see it. So if you can't see big differences in colors, then make it as light as you can. It might be twice as dark as what I'm using, or it might be lighter than what I'm using. Either way, it's going to work out for you. Like I said, there is no right and wrong with this. What you kind of want is the ability to go in there and make alterations as you're going. Now I can go in with black right now on the white and blow out all my black image areas and go in there and sketch with black and be done. That is very possible. But this builds up a lot more of that depth, a lot more of the grays and all the different values that you see while you're painting. So in Biker's defense, I am wearing a black apron. So, alright, John Black, we will see you soon. Thank you for coming in as long as you could. Have a great Saturday afternoon, evening, wherever you're at. Could be Sunday for you. Okay, so what we're going to do is come in with the first shade of gray, which, let's see, I could show you, let's pick a dark spot, which is over here. This is my gray right here. That's my light gray. It's a little bit lighter than a primer gray, which is actually showing up more than what I normally would do, but this is fine for this. I did add some white to it, kind of lighten it up, but not enough. But we'll come in here and we'll lay this color in here. And go ahead and hit that dark area. Now, why do I hit the light areas? Why do I hit the dark areas with the really light color? Because it allows me to see where that color is. It allows me to look at it and go, alright, this color is going to look good in this area, this area, this area, and this area. So it allows me to know where I really need to lay this color in. So is there any questions so far? Yeah, I'm basically spraying in the dark areas. What I'm going to do is start some of the lighter areas. We'll let the paint kind of fade into that area. So I'll spray the dark areas heavy and then let it fade into those light areas. So we're starting to build up the color properties of that. but we're also spraying where all the dark areas are. So we're getting that first layer of transparent dark layer in there. So I'm looking at all the black areas, and I'm going to go in there and hit all those black areas with this gray first. So on the wolf, we're looking at the nose, we're looking at the eye, we're looking at basically everything. Everything that has that real dark area to it, we're going to go in there and spray it and kind of lighten it up. Okay, now if you're spraying and you're finding out that it's kind of grainy, you don't really like the way it's looking, it doesn't seem to be, the airbrush doesn't seem to be performing the way you want it to, put a couple of drops of reducer in it. If you reduce it down a little bit more, you'll get the paint to flow a little better off the airbrush, off the needle, and it'll help you with pulling those little thin lines, getting that real soft transition. If it feels like you are too thin on the airbrush paint and it just wants to sit there and spider on you and you're having nothing but nightmares with that, then add a little bit of transparent base. That means it's a little bit too thin. If you're going for that translucent look, sometimes you need to add a little bit of translucent base in order to get it to have that transparent look, without being too watery, too watered down, over reduced. Now his star color, I'm going to go in there with this light gray, but we're not going to go too much darker on that. We're going to allow the red to darken that up. But we do want to get a little bit of gray base into that scar. To build up those properties of that deep color. So you can start seeing this image start to come alive. Now a lot of the times I'll sit there and I'll spray in a deep background while we're going. But that's going to be your guys' homework this week. Is to go in there and add a background to this. I'm going to kind of show you a little bit of how to do that. But we're not going to go too far into it because I'd like to see you guys come up with what you want. Now go ahead and add the dots in here. Make sure you get the right amount of dots. You don't want to sit there and put 10,000 dots up here. It's a lot. I've seen that happen a lot. Sometimes those whiskers, you get the paint flowing so good that you're so happy that you just keep going on these whiskers here. Okay, so now the front of the nose here is a little bit, it has this dark edge. See, right now I'm pulling back and I'm not getting paint the way I want to. So what I'm going to do is just simply wipe off the tip of the needle, pull back a couple times, and get whatever's in that airbrush out of that opening, kind of clean out the nozzle a little bit, and then go right back to it. And then I find out that the airbrush is spraying the way I want it to. So you'll notice a lot of the times you'll see me just kind of kick the airbrush off to the side, spray a couple times, and go right back to my artwork. Now what that does is that's just allowing me to clean out the nozzle real quick and not have to sit there and worry too much about, downtime trying to pull apart the airbrush and stuff. a lot of airbrushes will have this cutaway design in the trigger handle. Now the reason for this is so you can sit there, pull back on that trigger, and that pulls it back further than what your trigger. It pulls it back further than what your trigger can do. So if you sit there and you find out you're getting clogging, you can grab that, pull that back, and that just way opens up the nozzle. So now this is an Omni 4000. So that allows you to clean out your nozzles real quick. Now I haven't tried, but a lot of the different crossbreed guns, it's a little bit of a concern lane. You want to kind of start layering that in, but you don't want to go too nuts with it. You're not worried about every single little line and every single little detail right now. This is just kind of a blow-in design. We're kind of getting the flow of it, but you do want to sit there and work in that hair design, kind of where light and dark is, and work on that. Like I always say, you want each stage to look like it's the finished stage. So, you know, we're looking at all the dark areas right now, and we're going in and just touching those. So wherever there's dark areas, don't just put a blot of darkness. Go in there and kind of sketch in. Just kind of sketch in where that hair is. Yeah, where the direction of that hair is. Right, so we got hair that comes through here, and it has this light gray in there. We're just going to come in here and just do a little bit of that directional, which way that hair would be flowing. So we're just kind of lightly doing that, and then there's a couple little dark areas here, so we'll kind of blow in a little bit of that dark hair in here, just to get that down. You know, it has this kind of this flowing look in here in the nose area. So we can kind of go in there and just add a little bit of that flowing look. You always want to be thinking direction of hair with this. But you can see I'm not spending a lot of detailed time. I'm not sitting there trying to get these little lines and all this perfect stuff in here. I'm just kind of getting it in there and allowing some of that shape to flow in there. Now we're going to come in with different colors as we go. You know, not different colors, but black and white. We're going to come back in with the whites to build up these properties of this texture. So just because we're adding these gray spots now, if it starts seeming too dark, don't worry about that. We're coming back over that. You get a lot of understanding if you watch the previous video with the Elvis portrait we did. So now this white area here, even though it's white, it still has all these different texture lines in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in here and add some of that texture in here. Not really worried about where each line is and stuff like that. We're just going to add some texture to it. Don't worry about if it starts looking too dark. We're going to fix that. But right now what you're doing is trying to build up these properties of where the light and dark colors are. Now you need a base in here in order to show contrast in between dark and light. So if we were to just sit there and try to spray white directly on top of the white to get a white highlight, you're not going to get it. It won't happen. So what you need to do is add this gray tone in here, so that way it has something to bounce off of. There's a color, there's a shape for it to grab and kind of pull off of that color. So we're just going to keep on doing that. You got this line up here that comes up. Now when you look at his eye has a lot of that white hair, but there's also those deep inner hairs too. So just go in there and kind of add the direction of texture that comes up. Try to stay away from the eyeball. We want that eyeball to stay nice and bright. When you're doing stuff on t-shirts, that's when you really have to be careful of your light and darks, because it's hard to go back in with it. So if you were doing this on material, you would be spending more time, more detail trying to make sure that you don't hit the white areas. Even though they're wicked, the wicked opaque white has a lot of brightness to it that most likely you'll be able to pull that white back out. I know Spectratex white seems to be very, very bright. So that Spectratex also lays up on top of that material and helps. You can go back and look at our skull video that we did on the black t-shirt, and that'll show you how to bring those whites back out. So you can see that I'm just kind of lightly coming in here, showing a little bit of texture lines. But at the most point of it, I'm just trying to get this gray color in. You know, start building up this dark looking hair that's in here, but by adding hair. Right now it doesn't look like much to the hair, but it's there. So you can see that all of my dagger strokes that I'm doing here are based on the direction of the hair. I'm not doing cross lines or dots that don't follow that texture. You always want to look at this texture and go that type of texture. So while you're working this, now if you're with a pencil, I asked a lot of people to follow along if they're doing a brush or a pencil. If you're doing a brush, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to come in here with this and just lay it the same direction. Your light grays, you're going to come in here and do the same direction with that brush and get that flow of that hair to work in that direction. Pencil's the same thing. You can't sit there and put a shadow line in or a detail line that doesn't follow the direction of the path. So everything has to follow that direction. So now we got this, around this ear, we got this dark line going up and over. Now that's going to go pure black eventually. But in the meantime, we can sketch that in with doing a little bit of gray. We come back over here, because this is in camera view, and just kind of lay this out. Kind of get this laid in here, get that dark color kind of built up. Now if you notice, I'm still not exactly the color that we first started out down here, down lower. We can go a lot darker. You can see how dark that gray is and how dark this gray is. Because I'm just lightly laying this color in, I'm not doing 100% cover. We even have properties in this first color. Your first color of gray has endless properties. Now this is where you get into what they call the buffer color and a transparent color. This color is a buffered transparent, which doesn't make sense really, but it does. It's a buffered color, the fact that it will only get this dark. That is dark as your